Welcome back to Josh Hogue Arts. We are going over the second workshop of the OPSU Stay at Home Art Jubilee Edition. We're going to go ahead and change up the scene a little bit and go to my pottery studio today. It is a work in progress, but I do have access to my pottery wheel and clay, so let's go ahead and make some pottery, and I will show you some of the techniques that I use to throw on the wheel. Pottery studio, here we come. All right, here's some of the tools that we're going to be using today. We have our clay knives to the left. We have our sponge for water control, kidney ribs, a needle tool and something to sign your work with, and some trimming tools. Besides these tools, we do have our potter's wheel and our potter's bats. And one more tool that will come in those pottery kits is this wire tool, and this is simply to cut off chunks of clay from your block. I mean, it doesn't have to be a block, it could be just whatever chunk of clay that you have. And it's just like cheese. Voila, we have a block of clay. So when we mentioned bats earlier, I actually use a bat system, which this is the system and this is the bat. And a bat is literally just something that you put on the potter's wheel to take it off and be able to hold it on a separate platform instead of cutting it off your wheel and then having a chance of deforming that piece of pottery or messing it up. So your pottery piece, when it's finished, will be drying on this bat until it's ready to be cut off and it's firm. For the purpose of you seeing what I'm doing, the top part of me is going to go ahead and be cut off for the remainder of this tutorial, but let's make some pottery. All right, the any way you put any bat onto your wheel, there are these two knobs and you will have holes on the back to guide you. Until that is firm and snug on the wheel. The way these bats go onto the system is you're just gonna put it in there and make sure it's snug. And the way you get them out is these right here. Grab a tool, bring it out, and then you're good. So this is highly recommended. I'll go ahead and put in the description how to get this bat system. All right, flip the switch on your wheel and only have it on when you're in control of the pedal, because the pedal controls the wheel. And it spins, and you can control how fast it's spinning by the pressure of your foot on this pedal. I'm going to spin it around and just clean it off real quick. There's a little dirt on it that is not clay. So with any project that you want to do with clay, even if you get it from a box, clay needs to be wedged to get air out of it, and it also needs to be wedged to get kind of the motion of the clay to move the way that the wheel is spinning, because clay has memory. That's what makes it better than dirt. It makes it more special than dirt, because it can move and bend and it has that body to it, but that body also retains the memory. So right now it's very compact in the shape of the block that it came from. So we're gonna go ahead and slap this down a few times. Then I'm gonna go ahead and wedge it just like you would wedge like dough. So we're gonna wedge down and almost towards the center, but kind of at an angle as well. And eventually what you're gonna get is kind of a cone. So it's kind of down and sideways, and it's gonna give you this spiral, and that's gonna mimic the spinning of the wheel, and this is just gonna make throwing easier for you. And I'm using a little bit more clay than a beginner would use, just so I can show you things like this, where it's harder to see with a smaller piece of clay. And normally you wouldn't want to wedge on the wheel. Normally you would wedge on like a wedging table or something, but I haven't built that for my studio yet, and I always wedge smaller things on the wheel anyway, just because it's faster and convenient. You don't have to get up and do a separate thing. And then after you get your cone shape, I like to slap it into a cylinder and then slam that down and then hit it. And this is the shape I go for. So it has like that dome shape, but it has the memory of spinning in the circle. So the next move you want to do is go ahead and get your wheel a little wet, and then slam this sucker down. All right, and you want to make sure this is connected to the bat. So if you're a beginner, you can go ahead and just use your thumb like this. But literally, I just grab my finger, push it down, spin it, and it's attached. So when throwing pottery, you have to understand there is centrifugal force working against you, and you need to brace yourself without overworking your body. So what I'm doing is I'm actually using my legs, and I'm putting my elbows. If you have to put your elbows in there, go ahead, but I am bracing my arms against my leg, and I'm using my abdominals to push in to the clay to get it to the center, because what you want to do is get this in the center. So when you slammed it down, it should be in the middle as much as you can see with your eyes. I've done this a lot, so it's pretty in the center already. It's just going to be a matter of getting those particles to be in the center too. So when I spin this around, I'm leaning into this and going forward. So I don't have a lot of huge arm muscles, and trust me, people that do have huge arm muscles can't do what I'm doing right now, simply because they don't understand it. So I braced my arm into my leg. I'm still trying to get it to the center. And what I like to tell people is you're not pushing it into the center as much as you're pushing it down and forward. And then you're bringing it up. So you're squeezing on the sides, down and forward. And what this down and forward does is it goes towards the middle just with the spiraling. So centrifugal forces bring it down into the middle naturally. So you're letting the clay work for you, not against you. And down and forward. And generally what I call this is coning and doming, because you're bringing it into a cone shape by bringing it up like this. So you have your cone, and then you bring it down towards the center with this part of my hands into a dome shape. But I can tell that it's uneven, so you're gonna have to do this until you feel no force against your hands. And see, just my hands right here, they're rocking. And just for demonstration, I'm gonna do that and show you the difference. Okay, so now you can see more of a wobble because I hit it out of place, but that's okay because we're gonna do the same technique. Bring it up, bring it down. And what helps me and people I've taught in the future is this excess right here is a lot of what messes you up. So if you have a lot right there, go ahead and use your finger, take that off, put it in your bucket, and then keep going. Because by using this technique, you are pushing clay down to the edges that is uneven. So when you take that off, it takes a lot of the uneven surface. Okay, so once you have your dome that is even, you're gonna go ahead and push it down all the way to kind of a disc shape. And the way I do this is I brace with my left hand, and then this part of my hand, I'm gonna go ahead and push it down. So at this point I have this flat shape. I'm gonna go ahead and open with my knuckle. And there are tons of ways to do this. This is called opening your pot. So I'm gonna go ahead and open it with the knuckle of my hand. And right here, this little opening right here is what I'm gonna go ahead and hook open with the hooks of my hands like this, while using my left hand to keep it even. And this right here normally pops up, so if I just use this hand, see how this is popping up and it's getting uneven? I'm actually using my left hand to keep that down and even. And all I'm doing is going to the side. So depending how open you want your piece to be is how big you want the circle to be. I'm gonna stop right here. Simply because I don't want a huge piece. So this is where this needle tool comes into effect. Your piece should be about that thick. I say from 1/4 of an inch to 1/2 an inch at most, because if it's too thick, it can pop and it can explode in the kiln. But if it is too thin, it can crack and things when people put like hot liquid into the cup, or if it has a temperature shock, or in the kiln during the firing process. So just simply put this in the middle And that is very thick. So pulling this out, I have about that much. That is like 2.5 inches. So I need to open this more. So all I'm gonna do is cover my hole by going back and forth. Press down to open it more. And then the same thing I was doing when I opened before. Okay, and when you get this edge weird like that, just use your hands, brace your walls with your left hand, and then press down with your right to get a flat surface. So next what you want to do is compress your bottom, and this just makes sure the chemicals are nice and tight, and there's no chance of it cracking in the kiln or later after it's finished. So I'm just pressing it down and going from the center to the side with my fingers and my sponge, and the reason I use my sponge is so that it has an even pressure. If you use your fingers, you'll have finger lines in there, and it will also kind of mess up that texture. Unless you want like a swirl, you can use your finger and make a swirl in the bottom. But at this point, I have it open, I have a compressed bottom, so I'm gonna go ahead and throw now. This is the process they consider throwing. So I'm gonna clean up my vat. And notice that I'm not using a ton of water. You need it to be wet to where your hands don't stick, but you don't want it too wet because water breaks down clay and it can slowly dissolve your piece, so you don't want that to happen. So the process of throwing is this hand is above this hand, and you're basically pushing in like this evenly and then just bringing it up straight. And this is considered pulling, but it's not really pulling. You're literally squeezing the walls together and going up at an even pressure, and this is allowing the pottery to just bring itself up like it has nowhere else to go. Use your sponge, get it a little wet, empty that water from your sponge, get your hands in place, and then you're gonna go ahead and do your first throw where it goes a little in because centrifugal force is gonna bring it out. So I'm gonna cone it in. So go in. Press it down. Okay, so my first throw is going to look very domed like that. I'm gonna go ahead and press down my top, compress my top, just like I did when I opened it. And then at this point, I'm gonna go as straight up as I can because you want to have kind of a cylinder. Make requests on the description, and we'll go ahead and make pieces that you guys request so you can see how they're made. And the little difference in technique that I use to accomplish different shapes. So I'm going straight as possible, almost going in still a little because I don't want centrifugal force to bring it out, or I'll just have a bowl or something that might collapse. So compress my top. And notice that I'm using my sponge and getting the water out of the bottom every time I do this, and that's just so water doesn't break down the bottom of my piece. I'm gonna go ahead and keep doing this process over and over again. I'm putting a little bit of water and then throwing it up. So I'm gonna do this until there's not much clay down here and I have even walls. So I'm pushing under and then pushing the inside and slowly bringing it up. Be patient. Notice the wheel's not going super fast. I keep my foot on the wheel if you cannot control it, and it goes too fast because your foot's on it, you can take your foot off the wheel and it'll still go at this pace. Alright, and from a cylinder you can almost make any piece. So when you make a plate, it's going to be a large cylinder, and you bring out the lip. For a cup, it can go straight up or it can bowl out. So for the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to go ahead and use a metal rib. And if it's dirty like this one is, go ahead and wipe it off with your sponge. The way this works is the way I bend this, it's called the kidney rib because it's shape. But I bend it like this to get a round shape, or I could use the flat side to get it straight. So just to get these marks off of it and to get it smooth, I could just brace the inside. So anytime you use a rib, brace the inside, push against it, and just go up like you were throwing. And just something basic like that you could do over and over again to get a smoother surface, but I just took that texture off and all that moisture. And I like to do that when I'm shaping my piece, just so it gets a little drier and a little firmer. So at this point, I'm gonna push from the inside and brace with the outside with this rib to shape it to a smooth shape. So that's how we use a rib. I still get a little wet so my hands don't stick to the shape. And with my hands inside and out, I am just pushing out from the inside, and then using my outside hands to go ahead and shape. And notice that it's gradual, it's not all at once. So you don't want to push it too hard or it's gonna get off center, it's gonna wobble, it's gonna break down. All right, so at this point I have a pretty basic honey jar shape. I'm gonna go ahead and use my trimming tools. I told you I was gonna use the wooden knife to trim this, and literally what you're doing is you're just bringing this knife in and cutting off clay. All right, and all that did is take off the excess. This actually came off the bat, which is fine. This was a little firmer clay. We'll go ahead and stop the video and let this firm up, and we'll go over trimming. All right, now that this is nice and firm, we are going to go ahead and use our wire tool, slide it underneath, press it against the board, and bring it towards ourselves to cut it off. Right now, it just slid off. That's fine. But you normally just run all the way through. And then turn it upside down to let this side dry. So we're gonna let this firm up and then we'll trim it. All right guys, we have a little something different here today. We are going to reconstitute some of this clay, and this is just something I wanna show you. So I have this cooler right here, and I'm gonna go ahead and put this block of clay in that water and allow it to set over 24 hours. And this is gonna allow this clay to reconstitute itself without spending a lot of time wedging and doing all that thing, and still have a block of clay. That's rock solid. Normally I would have a bucket for this, but this is just convenient because it's square and it's cheap. So good use of money. So I did fill this up with water. I'm just gonna stick this block in there and just let it rest over 24 hours, and it should reconstitute to where it's pliable and I can use it again, because after all, clay is just clay and water. So there we go. So at the point of trimming, the clay is not going to be too hard to where it's dry and it's going to be flaky. It's still going to have some moisture to it. It's just not going to be able to bend and move if you pinch it. But really, you just want this piece to be in the middle where you can spin your wheel, and it's not going to be wobbled on each side, so it's a little off, so you just tap it. And allow it to be in the center. That trick right there is going to be hard for a lot of people to do on their first try, but you're basically just looking at this piece and then just tapping into the middle. I have it into the middle now. And then you want a wetter clay, and this is a different clay just because I grabbed a random bag from my clay pile, and it ended up being my white sculpture clay, and that's fine. All we're going to do with it is we are going to hold our piece down, and we are going to put this clay down and mush it. So if you're doing this and you have to put clay all around it, that's fine. It's not going to hurt your pot. If it's at the right firmness it needs to be, this just allows it to stay in place. And when trimming your pots, you want a bigger trimming tool and a smaller one. And the bigger one's going to get you started and take off a lot of the clay, while the smaller one's going to do more detail. So since it's in the center, you don't want to go too aggressively just in case the pot comes off, but you're just taking clay off gradually. And most of this is going to be excess. A lot of beginners don't take enough clay off, so they have super thick bottoms. And I made this bottom a little thicker. That way I can kind of demonstrate some things you can do if you have really thick bottoms. so you see I have kind of a foot right here. What I want to do with my foot, this is up to you. You can leave it flat, but I'm going to go ahead and give it a foot ring. So first I want to make sure the bottom is flat. So there was a little coming up. And then I want to clean my ring up. And then at this point, all I want to do is make the middle ring hollowed out. So measure where you want your foot to be. So I want it to be about that thick. I'm just going to go in, go towards the center. It's going to have like a spiral at first, and then go back out. And then at this point, you can just use your flat end to your trimmer and even that surface. I normally actually don't do fancy feet. I usually trim off the excess, tap the bottom, and sign it. So then last thing you want to do is, of course, sign your work. So I sign with my last name, and you can literally sign with a sharpened pencil. This is a cake decorating tool. And then I put a little shamrock because you guys know I like shamrocks. All right, so take your clay that's holding it off, and voila, we have a little honey pot. But that's it for our basic tips and tricks for throwing. Be sure to comment and tell me what kind of items that you would like to see for future videos, and I will get on that. And be sure to tune in to the next video as we go over video editing to cover some of the things we missed in our last video. And you guys commented, so make sure you put those comments and tell me what you'd like to see. So you're taking full advantage of this quarantine art demonstration segment. But this is it for today, guys. We'll see you next time.